Radio on 95.5, 88.3 FM, and online at www.zjbradio.com. And now we have a special presentation here on ZJB Radio.
Government officials, members of the media, good afternoon and welcome to this 2021 Financial Aid Mission press conference. We have now concluded 10 days of FAM discussions, which were very engaging. The discussions surrounded a range of policy issues, plans, programs for the upcoming financial year, and which will have budgetary implications going forward. I know the general public is very keen to know the outcome of the FAM discussions. I will therefore invite His Excellency the Governor, Ms. Shailaja Anam Raju, Economic Advisor and Senior Responsible Officer for Financial Aid, and the Honorable Premier to give brief remarks on the FAM. I'll first call on His Excellency, Mr. Andy Pierce, to give some brief remarks.
Thank you very much, FS. I just turned on my video just for this bit, and I'll turn it off afterwards because I find down my end of the island, if I keep it on, the sound gets a bit distorted. But thank you. I thought the FAM this year was a very, very good set of discussions, despite being virtual. I was really struck by the sheer range of issues. I won't mention them all, but just to give some examples, the air and ferry services to our island, tax reform, disaster response, the prison and police force resourcing, maintenance issues, social security funding, and on it goes. It's a very, very big range of issues. And I'm conscious too that our tiny Montserrat public service grapples valiantly with those issues, which would tax the public service of a much bigger jurisdiction or country. It's a very demanding process indeed, and I wanted to say a real thank you, to record a real thank you to Montserrat government and public service for their resilience and patience and good humour in dealing with that very heavy load, and also to thank FCDO colleagues for their support, always stalwart, always there for us, particularly at a time when the situation in the UK is so difficult, with the tragic milestone, I'm afraid, of 100,000 deaths from COVID having been passed just a day or so ago earlier this week. At the start of the FAM, when we were meeting with our friends from the media last week, I think it was, I said that I hoped we would achieve various things. I said I hoped we could recognise that there was an exceptionally difficult financial situation as a context for the FAM this year. I hope we could recognise a big range of challenges that we had, and that the FAM this year, or any year, couldn't hope in itself to solve all of those in one go. But I hoped we would be able to set the challenges out honestly and clearly for ourselves, and outline a pathway, a sort of practical pathway, not with unrealistic deadlines and timeframes, but a practical pathway for ourselves to deal with at least the major issues. And throughout, I hoped we could keep it simple. That's a real watchword for me, as colleagues in Montserrat know. I wanted us to use that mantra of simplicity as a theme in everything we touch and do in our daily work. And I hoped we would engage together, so we would see it and the way forward as a team exercise, a team operation, with all of us sort of buying into it and working together as stakeholders in the ultimate improvement of life for Montserrat. And I hope too that we would strengthen the role of the Governor and the resourcing of my office. I know those are points that the Premier commented on in his own opening remarks last week. And I think we've made good progress on those. I think we've broadly done all those things. We now need, after such a long and complex set of discussions, to take some time to reflect and put in order and rationalise our conclusions, work up a plan, a practical plan, and to crunch some numbers. And all that will take some time. It's going to be several weeks, clearly, before we can do that. And at the end of that, some tough decisions and tough prioritisation will be needed. This government has shown that it is ready to take tough decisions. So I think we shall find ourselves in a good, clearer and better position in a few weeks' time with the outcome of the FAM. And I just make a comment that my wife, Paul Pan, and I, we love our long distance hiking. And as any seasoned long distance hiker knows, the key is in the planning. It's in the planning of what you take with you in your big backpack, what you prepare, and in the mapping. And I think this FAM has been a good sort of base camp for us in calibrating our route in the months and years ahead. So thank you very much, everybody. I really enjoyed participating in it and learned a lot. Thank you.
Shailansha, you're now invited to give remarks.
Thanks very much. I hope I'm visible to everyone. It's terribly odd having to do this virtually with not being able to see people in front of me, and I think that sort of that's pretty much been the entire FAM, a virtual FAM with no face-to-face discussions, with 10 or 15 people around a virtual room. And it's been particularly difficult because it's my first financial aid mission as the new senior responsible owner of financial aid and the senior economist on this. But I have been to Montserrat a couple of years ago and met some of you, but not all of you. I just want to start with some hellos and introduce, there is a whole team on our side here who've been engaged, and I'm hoping that in due course some of us will be able to come out. I just want to thank particularly the Honourable Premier, His Excellency the Governor, Honourable Ministers, and all of the Government of Montserrat officials, including MoFam, who've been actively engaging in this year's financial aid mission. And it's particularly good for us because there's been such engagement across all the meetings that we've had a very good flavour of the kind of key stakeholders that are involved. I suppose I just also want to say that they were intense meetings. They've gone on for quite some time. We also had a number of pre-FAM discussions at which ministers and ministries were in attendance, and collectively these have been very useful to provide some context, and I too, like the Governor, have learned quite a lot. I just wanted to reiterate some of the messages because they are live and active within the UK. It's no doubt been the economic situation is undoubtedly what's been sort of most challenging for this year. And in the UK, it's been challenging because of lockdown. Government of Montserrat has come out very early and quite ahead. And it's notable that their estimates most recently for a reduction in economic activity has been in the order of 7 to 8% reduction. And that means that it's a particularly challenging year. But I think one of the main takeaways is that there's quite a lot to be positive as well. The UK has provided an additional £3.5 million worth of COVID support, and I really hope that that's helped reduce some of the scarring to the economy that a pandemic of this sort can do. Clearly, as months have gone by, the resilience of Government Montserrat's revenues have shown through. And I think as time passes, many of the sectors of the economy are now operating at a much stronger level. And I think especially following the Government of Montserrat's strong initial response to the pandemic, all of which I think have helped secure Montserrat in this position. And I suppose the only thing I would say is that, it's thankful that for the island is safe, it's stable. And unfortunately, we can't be there, but it's beautiful and COVID-free. And I'm not sure many places can claim this at this stage. And so I think it's something to as a takeaway. But I think COVID-19 though has somewhat masked the ongoing challenges the Government of Montserrat faces. And we've had an opportunity to pay some attention to some of those during this financial aid mission. And I think, the Governor's alluded to them. We've touched on a wide range of set of issues. and have really been able to unpack both the analysis, the implications on the budget, and the implications for the future of Government of Montserrat's finances. And I think we've tried to make sure that with COVID-19 in the background, we have looked at these ongoing challenges as part of this plan process. I didn't want to say very much more. I think the Governor has highlighted me to make a future plan. In the UK, ministers are having to make some very tough decisions about how spending will be cut. And, and I think this is going to probably get mimicked a little bit within the Government of Montserrat. And as the Governor says, Government of Montserrat not, it knows how to make some tough decisions. And this is a year that, will be unsettling for Montserratians. But, I think Government of Montserrat can be called upon to make these decisions to ensure we get a balanced budget this year. I'm just going to conclude here and just say, we look forward to working with Government of Montserrat in the next few weeks, make the right balanced decisions, looking forward around making the appropriate measures and reforms that are needed to mitigate against some of those long-term liabilities we've been discussing that pose some significant fiscal risks for Government of Montserrat, but we will work together to do that. And we just want to reassure you that we will be continuing to help Montserrat to fight COVID-19, and including with planned vaccines coming forward in the late part of January and early February. And so that's it. I just want to say I'm grateful for everyone's time and to reassure you that we in the UK are really trying to fight for the best settlement possible for Montserrat. Thank you.
Thank you, Shailaja. Honorable Premier.
Thank you, FS. It was truly an experience for myself and my team over the past 8 days or so. When we sat into the family discussions, we certainly wanted to have an appreciation for how discussion takes place and what is involved. And over the past 8 days, Government of Montserrat and the FCDO team engaged in a number of discussions whereby the policymakers and technicians presented the development focus for Montserrat along with the priority areas for resourcing. Additionally, the Government of Montserrat outlined plans for growth, particularly given the slump that we have in the COVID pandemic. For many of you, the nomenclature financial aid mission could be interpreted that aid to Montserrat will be discussed. And may I say, yes, but in an abstract way. One would expect that at the end of the discussion, the Government of Montserrat will say to the press that we have been given X amount of dollars as budgetary assistance for the next year. But that is not the case. That will come up later when the team goes back to in London decided to how much that package should be. So I don't want to raise expectations. So that to ask me how much money we got, because we have no idea as to what we will get. The budget discussions were held in so far that the draft budget and the strategic plans for 2020-2021 was reviewed, and the draft estimate for 2021-2022 was also presented for discussion. In addition to the budget figures, a number of new spent areas was presented to the FCDO for consideration. Public servants were engaged for most of the time in explaining to the team how they perform, how the ministry perform, and government recognizes that the public service must act as an engine of change, an enabler, for in order for the private sector to be the engine of sustained growth for Montserrat's economy. We discussed a number of key areas to include pension reform, social services, social security fund, government contingency liability, the safeguarding and social issues, human resource issues, welfare system, and health reform, along with access. These are some of the areas that were discussed during the farm, and some of the areas that your government have an interest in because they will advance economic growth in Montserrat. We found that discussions were fruitful, maybe not not to the expectation of all of us, but we understand the situation as it exists. We understand that we depend on the UK for assistance and that they too are going through some difficult times. We understand that. But we also understand that as people in Montserrat, as politicians, we are accountable and have a responsibility to ensure that the UK fund, UK aid given to us is used to the benefit of everyone. We believe that we must work together in partnership. I get the sense from the team over the past couple of days that there is this need for us to work together, and I believe that they will do and we will do that, work together for the advancement and good of all of us. It's a partnership between the UK and the Montserrat government, and we will continue to engage with each other over the coming months to ensure that we satisfy the needs of one another. During the question time, I will elaborate on some of the points that we raised, so I don't want to take too much time, but notwithstanding the challenges arising from COVID-19, this administration is resolute for us to work together. All of the strategic partners, whether FCDO, Government of Montserrat, private sector, we all must work together in the coming months to ensure that we build a strong and sustainable Montserrat. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Premier. At this point, we'll open up to questions from members of the press, and we have confirmation of 5 media houses being online. So to ensure that there is a smooth flow, I will call your media house and the representative will introduce his or herself before asking the question or questions they wish to ask. Kindly also indicate who you wish to address your question to before asking the question. Additionally, just to ensure that all media houses are given equal opportunity, it's 3 questions per media house. If time permits, we may allow additional after that, those 3 questions per media house. So the first media house I'll call on is ZJB Radio.
Thank you very
Radio
much.
Montserrat?
Yeah, thank you very much, Fiona. Are you hearing me properly?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay. All right. I note that His Excellency the Governor would have spoken about discussions and wanting them to be simplified rather than making them complex. I'd like to start, though, by asking, we've just received an item which spoke to the UK diplomats being told to cut up to 70% from overseas aid. How would this affect Montserrat's budgetary package? Now, there'll be weeks in which these diplomats would have to make that decision. And there was one, Colleen Wainwright, who would have said in her opening, at the opening of the farm, they did not know what this would mean for the overseas territories. Now, we knew before of the cut from 0.7 to 0.5, and now this addition where we are looking at the diplomats being told to cut up to 70%. That's the first question.
That question was addressed to His Excellency, Andrew Pierce.
First, His Excellency, and of course, I'd like to get a feedback as well from Shailaja
FCDO?
Anam Raju. Yes.
Right, no, thank you very much, James, for the question. I mean, my colleagues Shailaja and the team in London will have a more detailed perspective on it, but I think in essence, what is happening is really as we described last week, that the UK has had to make a reduction in its commitment in terms of the proportion of GDP it commits to ODA spending from 0.7% to 0.5%. And then, of course, within that, the economy itself has taken a hit from COVID. So the economy itself is smaller, and that's a rather fluid position. So the totality of British ODA spending is certainly having to reduce. But the expectation and the commitment of our ministers is that within that we will sharpen our focus in our spending and make sure that we commit to still support strongly all the key areas where people need help overseas. And underlying it all, we haven't yet worked through the full process of that. You'd understand, James, that there's quite a lot of sort of prioritization and analysis that needs to go into a big cross-cutting reform of that sort or change of that sort. But underlying it all is a very strong British commitment that the needs, the reasonable needs of the overseas territories will remain a priority call on our budgets. So we can and should take a strong reassurance from that. Yes, we're having to cut our cloth to meet a very difficult economic situation, a historically difficult economic situation. No contraction like this really seen since the 1930s in the major Western economies, major developed economies. So we're having to recut our cloth somewhat, but it's A, temporary, and B, there's a strong assurance that the overseas territories, members of the British family, will continue to receive a strong priority. I hope that helps, James, a bit.
Yes, Your Excellency, that is good from your point of view, your perspective. I'd like to just get a feedback from Shailaja on that as well.
Thanks very much. I'm just going to first re-echo and Governor's points. I think those still stand true. I think the only other points I'd like to add is that I think one of the features of having this be a very tight sort of fiscal year for the UK is that we've moved into a one-year budgeting cycle for the UK as well. And that puts us in an extraordinary position of coming into one of these financial aid missions without an understanding of what it is our own settlements are for our department. And it says, and of course, that is also for what we usually look to bid for the overseas territories. And so that process is ongoing at the moment. And I think the implications of that is that we're both trying to secure budgets internally, as well as trying to make sure that we get the best settlement from Government of Montserrat. And I think the Governor has highlighted that Montserrat and the overseas territories have got a special place in that respect. But the role is upon all of us to make sure that we make the right kind of spending choices, both for today's budgets, but also for the future. The only other thing I would say is that it's also on the back of having the FCDO merger, the shrinkage of the economy and the reduction from 0.7 to 0.5. So, you know, we're basically looking at trying to preserve a very strong budget for the overseas territories, knowing that quite a lot of cuts are on the horizon for many other geographies of the world. And so I think, you know, we're hopeful, but we need to be mindful that this has to be a very, very challenging year, both in Montserrat and outside. And you know, I think Montserrat will do very well if it can secure something that at least allows it to stay within a baseline of where it's been in previous years. I'll pause there. I hope that was sufficient. Thank you.
Yes, that was helpful, Shailaja. I'll Fiona, am I allowed to ask my 3 questions or break?
Yes, so just
okay.
proceed with the other 2 questions.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you very much, V. Mr. Premier, I'd like to engage you at this time. And I'd like to refer to a statement that was made earlier during the opening of the FAM by Colleen Wainwright. And she spoke of Montserrat raising revenue and making savings. You know, this was intimated during that particular period. Now, with the cuts and so on that we've been hearing of, Montserrat's precarious position, I think would not allow us to make those savings or even generate additional revenue. Mr. Premier, what's your position on this?
Thanks, James, for the question. When it comes to budgetary aid, we certainly is expected to manage it so that the masses can benefit. In terms of Montserrat raising additional taxes, that discussion took place during the farm. And we have pointed out on numerous occasions that it's extremely difficult for us as a government to impose additional taxes on the people of Montserrat who are already heavily taxed. That being said, we have to ensure as a government, along with the public servants, that we manage the resources that we have efficiently and effectively. We do not know how much we will get, but it matters not. We will have to ensure that we provide the necessary and relevant services to the people of Montserrat, while at the same time managing whatever is left. There might be no room for extravagancy, but we have to ensure that at the end of the day, whatever that package is, it serves the interest of the people of Montserrat. But taxation, we will look, but I cannot guarantee anyone that at this point, this government is in a position to introduce any additional taxes on the population.
All right, Mr. Premier, and just as a follow-up to that, what is the situation? I would have other questions for you later, but what is the situation, or I'll put it this way, can you provide us with an update on the deficit in the budget?
The 2021 budget, we started off the year with an estimated $22 million deficit. And that was in the height of COVID. I've said time and time again in Parliament that we are experiencing some increase in revenue, so that at the end of the financial year, we don't believe that deficit will be $22 million. At this moment, I cannot say exactly, but the budget has performed, the economy has performed much better than we predicted in June of last year. And so I can assure the people of this country that the deficit will either be wiped out or the amount will be small at the end of the financial year.
Thank you very much, Mr. Premier. Fiona?
Thank you, James. I'll now call on Discover Montserrat. Discover Montserrat.
Good day, everyone. Narissa Golan for Discover Montserrat. Premier, this is for you. Could you tell us, you listed several areas that were discussed during the FAM, and I know it's still pretty early in the decision-making process, but in terms of priorities, where does social services benefits, also the Social Security Fund, and also private sector development fall in the list of priorities?
Any social agenda for government is critical. And so social services, there's, in light of COVID and the sluggishness of the economy, we recognize that there are a number of households and individuals who require help. And that has been raised time and time again during the last 8 days of discussion with FCDO, and they understand that. So we are working, hopefully we might be able to increase that social services line. That's not a promise. We'll wait and see exactly what our package is like. But there are more and more persons who are falling below, falling and need some assistance. So this is an important area for us. In terms of social security, it's absolutely critical that my government work assiduously with FCDO and the Social Security Board to safeguard the fund. We recognize that this is the only social safety net that persons will have if and when they retire from whatever work they're doing. And so at this point in time, we cannot allow the fund to fall through. So we have had one of the most interesting discussions that I've had over the past days is the Social Security Fund and ways and means of how we can restore integrity to the fund. Government of Montserrat will have to make decisions to assist the fund to survive. We will make those decisions. Some might be a bit strenuous, but it is for the good of all of us. who are paying to the fund and who do not want to see the fund go under, who want to see the fund survive. So that at the end of the day, when you and all the other persons who are now contributors retire, that they will benefit. It is true that a strong economy will reflect in the fund itself. And when the economy is sluggish, then you'll find that if person is not working, then the number of contributors lessen. So we hopefully that we can stimulate the economy to the extent that more persons will be working. With additional measures that we're going to take in the coming months, that together this will help the fund to go through this hard time.
Thank you, sir. I know that a lot of the plans have been banking on the CIPREC funding to really keep the economy going. What other elements in terms of private sector support are in the works or have been discussed that could possibly add some extra backing to be able to get the economy going?
Thank you, Nerissa. Focus has been given to the private sector and private sector development. This is key for us. And so you may have heard from me that we are working on streamlining the Ministry of the Department of Trade. We are to bring in that personnel to us to work with us in terms of strategizing to develop a Montserrat enterprise. Because we believe that it is the private sector of Montserrat that's going to drive the economy, not government. It is, and so we are doing everything possible. And we have had discussions with FCDO, and we plan to have further discussions with them to see how best we can introduce measures to get the economy going. I know CIPREC will, in fact, in the short term, bring some measure of support to the economy, but that is just one aspect of our development strand. And so we will be working with the FCDO to see if we can enter in another tranche of discussion, another round of discussion, whether the tranche of separate funding. But that we don't know yet. But in the meantime, it is us working with the private sector in Montserrat to ensure, and that will happen through, of course, you know that the National Development Foundation have reintroduced their funding streams, and so this will encourage other persons who find difficult to acquire financing for the business to access some funding, and no doubt expanding. And the Department of Trade is putting on a number of programs to assist small businesses to better manage their business.
Okay, thank you. This question is for Ms. Amaraju. Amaraja, all right. Given Brexit, Montserrat would have lost its access to the EDF funding. Is that an area that the British think they'll be able to support? Is that something that's going to be further off in the works given the current situation?
Hello, many thanks for that question. I think, as I was highlighting earlier, it's definitely gone into the mix as part of the bids for the overseas territories. No decisions have been made yet, and it's gone in alongside the other support for capital and financial aid requests. So, we hope for a good outcome, but it is a difficult year. So there's no decisions have been made on that. I think that's as far as we can say and commit at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nerissa. We have Ali Ogana Express on the line as well. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Malika McKenzie from Ali Ogana Express News. My first question, and it starts with a statement that was made by Mr. Colin Wainwright in her opening introductory speech. We need to show the UK Treasury how you have been managing your resources. The question is, haven't the government already shown this, having reduced the proposed budget deficit from $22 million to almost a balanced budget? And cuts to a number of government funded services, for example, such as our ferry service and all of that. If they have not done, what does the government do?
Who was that question addressed to?
It was to the team from UK.
Hello. Thanks very much for that question. I mean, all I would say to that is that we provide, we work in partnership with the government of Montserrat. We work in partnership both in terms of getting a deeper understanding of the sets of issues, but also in the ongoing reforms that needed to take place to strengthen public financial management on the ground. But that said, it's been a challenging year, and we've worked quite closely with MOFAM this year, and that's sort of why it's important to make sure that we do this sort of close partnership to provide the assurances that we need, that ministers will require from us as well. And I suppose that's sort of an ongoing bit of work that we continue to do throughout the year. And MOFAM has responded very well this year. It is a challenging year. There's a lot of new budget spending pressures, and we'll continue to work with them, try to get that sort of rigor and control in place.
Thank you.
I don't know if, sorry to interrupt, perhaps just very briefly, thank you, Shalaja, and thank you, Malika, for the question. I mean, just might be worth adding here that to have managed a situation where at the start of the year, with the best guesses we could all come up with, we were looking at a deficit of over 20 million Caribbean dollars, so a significant percentage of our budget, to have managed throughout all the fluidities of this very sad past year and all the changes in international pressures, to have got to a point where essentially, as the Premier was saying in response to an earlier question, we're about on balance, is a great credit. I think is the really short and simple answer, is a great credit to the whole of the government of Montserrat, all parts of the team, to have managed in that way. And with the support of the UK, as Shalaja was saying, to be able to provide some support for people particularly affected by COVID as well in amongst that. So I think it's been a very good performance is the short answer, Malika, sorry there.
Thank you, A.P., and thank you, Shalaja. In the statement, Ms. Rainwright also seemed to suggest more belt tightening for the UK and its dependent territories. Realistically, what is the likelihood of Montserrat receiving additional funding for COVID relief to allow for direct cash injection for local businesses and residents who have been financially impacted by the pandemic? And lastly, are we likely to see cuts in the upcoming budget?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that last question? Your break in the communication affected our ability to hear.
Okay. I was saying the statement that Ms. Rain she also said that there were to be more belt tightening for the UK and its dependent territory. Realistically, what is the likelihood of Montserrat receiving additional funding for COVID relief to allow for direct cash injections for the local businesses and residents who have been financially impacted by the pandemic? And lastly, are we likely to see cuts in the upcoming budget?
Okay, so those are two questions. Who was the first one addressed to?
To the UK team.
Okay. So
the last one you can be to them and also to the government of Montserrat.
Okay, thank you.
Many thanks for that. Yes, I think I can just respond to that very briefly. You're right that this is another COVID-19 year, and therefore impacts of COVID will be felt both in Montserrat and, of course, through any measures that are being made by your neighbouring countries. So that's something we'll both need to keep track of. I think, government of Montserrat has a role to play as well, which is to be able to identify what are, if the COVID-19 measures are very important, then we need to all find a way of making space work within the budgets. That said, there are no decisions made in the UK. It is a tough year. And as I said, COVID-19 is going to be amongst the mix of bids that are being put forward. But the decisions are yet to come. And so there's no guarantees that can be made. And to be honest, as I've said previously, I think the overseas territories will fare very well if they walk away with sort of some form of a strong but a baseline budget for themselves. And so I think that's the kind of core messages. We're making strong attempts to find support elsewhere, but none of these decisions are made yet. And I think because Ms. Wainwright's highlighted this, is because it is a very serious year of cutbacks, and that's across all of the spending lines. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so your final question, you said that goes to the Government of Montserrat team. Is that what you said? The final question regarding cuts?
Yes. Yes.
Thanks, Malika. Cuts in the budget. We don't know what we're going to receive from the UK. What we receive from the UK will determine the strategies that we put in place to manage those funds. So until we get that figure, we won't be able to speak to it in any detail. I'm hoping that we will receive at least the same as last year, but we don't know. We understand the situation. So once we get that figure, we will get back to you in terms of how we decide to manage it to ensure that we use it in the country.
The final media house. Thank you, Malika. The final media house on the line today is DS Media. Can the representative indicate whether or not he's present still? DS Media? Okay. We're not hearing from DS Media. Okay, we're hearing. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dwight Sampson, DS Media. Question to the Honorable Premier and the respective ministers that that are present. My question is based on capital projects. We know that we have the airport tower and yesterday the launch of the solar panel, but what other capital projects would have been discussed at the recent discussions, and are we to see the commencement of any other major capital project during this year? And can that be listed by the ministers according to ministries, please?
Thank you, Dwight. The FAM, we do not discuss, or they don't discuss capital. It's basically look at the recurrent and the performance of the recurrent budget. Yes, the separate program operates on the steering committee, which meets once a month to determine how we advance those elements or those components within the program. And so you're quite rightly pointing out that we have started the air control tower. Yesterday afternoon, the launching of the groundbreaking ceremony for the 750 solar panel was done. We also now moving on to the MSS Block L&M. They're in a stage in which we should be able to go to tender shortly, I understand. There's some consultancies for housing, which we anxiously await the results, because it's important in order for us to start discussing any movement in housing solutions. Then we await those recommendations or those designs from these consultants. The big project within the CIPRIC is the hospital project. The minister is here, but I'm sure he won't want me to put him on the spot. But we are waiting for the preliminary designs. We don't have a new date yet. We should have had them in December. But once we get those preliminary designs, I know the minister and his team is working assiduously outside of the farm with the UK team to advance that project. The next stage will be to look at the preliminary designs, look at which option, and then go to tender for the design. So this is where we are. You know, the fiber optic is already up. It's just for the private telecommunication agencies to start looking at how they can utilize it within our homes. And there's a minor element for hot mix plants, which I understand has already been ordered and should be here at some time. The airport resurfacing has delayed for a bit due to no fault of ours, some difficulty that the contractors have in terms of securing their own hot mix plants. So this is where we are. In terms of new projects on the separate program, I guess we'll have to talk about a second phase of separate, which we as a government is anticipating and anxious to get into to get Montserrat going.
Okay, thank you, Premier. Yeah, thank you so much, Premier. Another question. Last year, 2020, of course, we had lockdowns and everything else that will happen in the year, and a lot of generally things that happen annually on the calendar by the government had to either be postponed or pushed forward to a new date. And right after we heard that there were belt tightening measures that most ministries had to cut back on their spending. With some of these items, these annual things on the calendar, would we be able to see them in this new financial year, or will there still be more belt tightening measures?
Could you just itemize those calendar items for me, please, so I can speak to them? Clear?
I'm speaking generally. Usually, there are items on the calendar that had to be either postponed or cancelled by various ministries and departments. Either for, well, most will probably be during the lockdown, and others would be because of ministries being asked to cut back on usual spending. So the ministries could not have done most of the activities that they would have done. So I'm asking, within the new financial year, will that be the same thing, or would ministries still be continued to ask to condense their spending?
Some of the activities that were suspended during the last financial year or this financial year is not as a result of finances, but rather as a result of COVID and the impact that COVID had on the population. So that was the major difficulty we had in terms of activities. And if you're referencing like festivals and sports and so, that is a matter for us and for the Ministry of Health. The government stands ready to accept any recommendations from the Ministry of Health in terms of going forward, in terms of whether we can put on an activity. It's not just a policy, not an emotional matter. It's basically a decision based on the science. And so we will listen to the health people and whatever the advisors, we'll discuss it together and come up with some solutions. We will, if we have to, manage the budget in a way which suppresses some activities in the budget lines. But I am not in a position to speak to that until, as I said before, until we know what that package is going to be like from the United Kingdom in terms of budget assistance. If and when that comes, then we'll determine what strategies we have to put in place to make sure that we still deliver those essential services like your health and education and other things, where we are suppressing things that may not be significant or creating a hardship on the population of Montserrat. And that's the position that we will take.
Okay, thank you so much, Premier. Final question. Is there any, or were there any discussions about within this new budget cycle to assist vulnerable families and persons within our community who would have either lost job or lost income or had their usual amount of income decreased, and any other means of alleviating the current economic hardship that persons are facing on the island?
Thank you very much. We have, over the past months, indicated to the population that as a government, we have tried to seek further assistance for persons who we understand are experiencing hardship. That is not forthcoming, and you understand why. You have heard Carleen and others from the FCDO team speaking to their economic condition in the UK. We are still looking as a government at how we can help persons who are really, really struggling. We have identified those groups, and we will discuss and see if within our budget, if there's any room for us to further assist persons. It's absolutely difficult. We're also trying to see how much jobs we can create during this time, so that persons will not just depend on government, but rather that they are able to work so that they can at least earn a living. And that's the position that we are taking at this point in time.
Okay, thank you very much, Premier. And at this point, we have come to the end of the question and answer of the press conference, and the end of the press conference indeed. So allow me to say thank you to all the media representatives who participated this afternoon, and also thank you to the Government of Montserrat officials and also the FCDO team and His Excellency Governor Andrew Pearce. Thank you. Thank you all for listening and for viewing.